What's going on, everybody? Thank you so much for joining us here for a special Wednesday edition of Fantasy MLB Today. We are a Sports Ethos presentation, of course, and I'm your host, Joe Orico. You can find me over on Twitter at Joe Orico99, and you can check out all of our fantasy baseball content at Ethos Fantasy BB. That's ETHOS Fantasy BB. You get all of our new podcasts, articles, news, and notes. Every bit of baseball content does get shared out over there. So make sure you guys are checking it out. If you're not on social media, sportsethos.com is the place to be. Now, we're going to be doing another team preview today. We're talking Boston Red Sox, and we've got an old friend of the show joining us here, Eric Cross. You can hear him on the Tool Shed podcast. You can find his work at FTN Fantasy and also at Rotoballer. He's doing a ton of stuff for the prospect community, but just like his co-host, Chris Clegg, going to be picking his brain about a specific team today and not about prospects in general. We did the Atlanta Braves with Chris Clegg, and now we are doing the Boston Red Sox with Eric. I really appreciate you coming on today. How you doing, man?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Excited to talk some Red Sox because it's a very interesting team right now, to say the least.
Yeah, I see you tweeting about them. I know that they're a team that definitely frustrates you. I can relate as a Blue Jay fan who's seen my team go through a disappointing offseason. It can be kind of tough following along with these teams. But we are going to be breaking down the Boston Red Sox from top to bottom. Before we do that, though, Eric, I want to let you tell everybody where you can be found, all the great work you got going on right now.
Yeah, thanks. Eric Cross04 on Twitter. I post all my stuff there. I have all the links to everything there as well. A lot of my work now is I have a Patreon, toolshedfantasy.com. All my fantasy rankings are there. I do a lot of prospect profiles, uh, MLB profiles, a lot of different things there as well. And then FTN Fantasy and Rotoballer for additional written content, and then the Toolshed podcast with the aforementioned Chris Clegg.
Yeah, Chris Clegg, and I think some congratulations are in order. Chris just posted out today that he is expecting his second kid. So congrats to
Yeah.
Chris. I know there's been a bit of trouble that they've had there, so it's really great to see him have some good news today. So congratulations to Chris Clegg. Make sure you're checking out everything that Eric and Chris have going on at the Tool Shed Pod. It is one of the go-tos if you are a dynasty/prospect person. I listen to every episode. You guys should as well. Make sure you're checking it out, and go follow Eric on Twitter at EricCross04. Going to be breaking down the Red Sox. If you are going to be watching the video version, I'm going to have roster resource here from Fangraphs open just so you can kind of have a bit of a guide. We're going to be starting at the top of the order here. I think we had to give the caveat that we're recording this in the middle of January. There could still be changes, but as of right now, this is what we are seeing based on the projections. And Jarren Duran projected to be the leadoff hitter. He had a very good season last year. He was somebody that I was very interested in, and it's hard not to be. He gave you 24 steals. He batted .295, chipped in 8 homers. Eric, do you like Jarren Duran this year? Do you think he is the leadoff hitter, and is he somebody that we should be investing in for fantasy?
Oh, absolutely. I love Jarren Duran, and I think he's finally, after a few years of a lot of profile changes, I think he's finally found that happy medium because, back when I saw him come through Double A, which I believe was 2019, which feels like forever ago, but he was more of the, line drive, gap to gap hitter, use the contact skills and utilize his speed. And then over the pandemic, he really bulked up a lot. If anybody ever saw like some photos of him from the complex and whatnot, he put on a lot of bulk and he was trying to muscle up and be more of a power hitter. And that approach just didn't really work for him. He sacrificed too much contact, was striking out more than he ever had. So now he's kind of, again, dialed it back a little bit, but still keeping some of that power. But again, finding that happy medium. And yeah, you saw a lot of good from him this past year. Average EV right around 90 miles an hour, hard hit rate 46%. So again, he's still keeping that good quality of contact, and he was above average contact skills. The whiff rate was the lowest of his career. Made a lot of good changes, and I think this is the Duran that is the best version that he could be given his skill set, and I think he's going to be, assuming we don't, trade him away. I've heard some rumblings of that. I don't think so. I think if we trade anybody, it'd be more like Wilyer Abreu. But assuming he is the leadoff hitter, which I believe he is, I mean, I think he could be in line for a 15 homer season. I won't go any more than 15 or so home runs because right field at Fenway, kind of can zap left-handed power a bit unless you're like Triston Casas. But 14, 15 home runs, somewhere's in that range, 30 plus steals, a solid average, and plenty of runs scored. Maybe he flirts with 100 runs scored, or at least like 90 or so. And I think his ADP is like close to 200 right now. So yeah, I am definitely all in on Jarren Duran this year.
Yeah, 176 is the ADP. I'm just looking back since the start of December. We're looking at 35 drafts. I think that's a really good price. You're getting a
Yeah.
leadoff hitter. I think he should be a leadoff hitter. Um, and that's what it's looking like anyway. I don't see that changing too much. He's going to give you speed. Now, maybe he doesn't give you the 295 batting average. That's probably, they're projecting 257. I could see him like 260, 270, a little
Yeah.
bit of pop. Run should be there. Speed should be there. And at that point, especially in a 5 outfielder league, outfielders dry up quickly, and so do stolen bases. You're getting both of them close to pick 200 with Jarren Duran. It's hard not to like what you're going to be getting out of him. I think that he is going to be a pretty big target for me this season. I haven't drafted him yet, but I could definitely see myself getting there. Rafael Devers projected a bad second here. Do you think that he's likely to fill up the 2 hole? And what is your outlook for Rafael Devers for this season? He had a pretty solid 2023.
Yeah, I do think he's in the 2 hole. I think, Cora likes Devers there. And I think it may determine if who else we get this offseason. They've been rumored to be in on another right-handed bat, so we'll see. But I think the 2 hole is ultimately where he spends most of his time this year. And yeah, it's funny too. You mentioned he had a good year, and he absolutely did. But I think people were slightly disappointed with this year, even though he hit 271, which is 24-point drop from where he was the previous year, but still had 33 home runs. He chipped in 5 steals, 90 runs scored. That's still a really good year. But people seem to be obviously not out on him, but it looks like the perceived value has kind of dropped a little bit. His ADP's dropped a little bit from this year as opposed to where it was last year. But you look at all the metrics are still right there. Walk rate and K rates are right in line with previous years. Quality of contact still very good. EV 93 miles an hour on average. Hard hit rate was actually the best of his career. Barrel rate 12.7%. So a lot of good there. I think he's going to have a nice bounce back year. He definitely underperformed. Like you look at some of the XBA versus the regular batting average, especially for breaking and off speed. Both were about 40 to 50 points higher for the expected metric there. And obviously those aren't everything, but he did get a little bit unlucky this year. But hopefully the lineup is going to be better as a whole. I think it was a middle of the pack lineup, kind of fell off end of the season. So I think he's going to have a nice bounce back here. I think you'll see that average tick back up closer to 290. He's a career 280 guy over 7 seasons. And I think if you're getting 280 in the 290 range with, 35 home runs and, plenty of counting stats and even, a handful of steals here and there, I think it's going to be another really good year. And I think you're going to get, if you're taking him, I think his ADP is, where's his ADP? Like 25, 30
Yeah.
now?
Yeah, 25.
Yeah. So I think it's a solid value. I mean, 15 teamer, and that's your second guy. I'm fine with that. 12 teamer, maybe your third guy, depending on if you picked early in the first and then have a late second, early third round. If you're in a 12 teamer, you can get Devers early third. I mean, I'd be ecstatic.
Yeah.
I love that value for sure.
You start Acuna, let's say a 12 teamer, you get the first pick, maybe even if you get the second pick, but with the first you get Acuna, you come back and you take Devers and then your SP1 or another offensive piece. It's hard not to like that.
Yeah.
Even in a 15 teamer, I think third base is not the deepest position, even though it's better than it maybe has been in recent memory. You're still getting that out of the way pretty quickly. You're locking up 30, 100, and 100 roughly. I know the runs haven't quite been there, but I think it's going to be pretty close. It'll be within shooting distance of 100. And that batting average, if you just look at the BABIP here on screen, it was under 300 for the first time since 2018. That batting average, even though 271 is already good, you can expect probably, like Eric said, in the 280 to 290 range. And even a 300 season is something that he is very capable of, as he has shown us before. In 2019, he batted 311. 2022 was 295. So there's nothing really not to like there. You're also, like you said, getting a couple steals out of your third base spot, which is not something that you're getting out of everybody. So I'll definitely take Rafael Devers in the middle of the second round. Now, Eric, I'm going to let you go on a little bit of a love tangent about Triston Casas because I know he is one of your favorite players. It's hard not to like him, especially what he did in the second half. But even as a whole, it was 24 homers, a 263 average. He's getting on base 37% of the time, nearly, with that 14% walk rate. Eric, the floor is yours to talk about Triston Casas.
Oh man, do we have enough time for me to fully talk about Triston Casas?
This will be a separate podcast where we just talk about Casas here.
It'll be like the rest of the Red Sox, and then like another second pod for Triston Casas. But yeah, like earlier today on Tuesday, I tweeted out, as I probably tweet about Casas at least once a week at this point. It's like almost like scheduled content for me. But if you look back at the second half of last year, he was 5th in WRC plus and WOBA. The only 4 he was behind for both stats were some guys named Acuna, Mookie, Matt Olson, and Shohei Ohtani. He was right in line. He was right ahead of Jordan, Freeman, Bryce Harper, Aaron Judge, the studs, all these first, second round fantasy studs. And this is the guy I always thought he could be. Like, I remember back in the 18 draft, I want to say it was, when we took him in end of the first round. Like, it's not often, especially in baseball draft, where like the guy you want is taken by your team. Obviously, it's kind of a crapshoot, or not a crapshoot, but not like football or basketball, so to speak, with the draft. And I wanted him in the draft. We got him. Saw him a lot in Double A, and even though he never put up the gaudy minor league stat line, like you heard like I forget what offseason it was, but it was an interview where he was saying like, yeah, I haven't really been focusing on hitting for power. I've been focusing on making contact, going the other way, working the count, like all those other parts of an at bat. And like, he knew he had the power. He could just flip a switch, turn that power on, and start driving the ball. And that's really what's happened. And we saw that end of last year. And like I said, I know you probably won't want to hear this as a Toronto guy, Joe, and it's nothing against Vlad Jr. at all, but it wouldn't surprise me if Casas outperformed Vlad Jr. And that's, again, just me loving Casas and the profile. It's a very good profile. It's elite power. Contact skills are, they're not elite on that side of things, but he's solid contact, solid approach. It's like not a lot of swing and miss in the profile. He's a very mature hitter, had a near 14% walk rate this past year. K rate was, right kind of around league average. Started driving the ball in the air a ton more this year, more line drives, more fly balls. Yeah, there's a lot to like here. And it wouldn't surprise me if we're looking at a guy that's hitting, he's probably more like 260, but that could be 35 home runs. And, if he's going to be the guy hitting directly behind, Devers and Duran, I mean, 3,500 is in play here. It really is, especially how he finished last year. Like, that's the pace he was on last year. Maybe he's even on a higher pace than that. So he's going, I think, right inside top 100 overall. I would scoop that up all day. Like, I'm trying to get as many shares of him as I can, because I really think that we're on the verge of this a full-fledged breakout. And then next year we're drafting him where we're taking, Olsen, Vlad, Freeman, those guys. I think he joins that tier this year for sure.
I can definitely see it. 112 is the most recent ADP. He's going in a range of 76 to 145. I don't really necessarily want him at 76, but you don't really need him at 76. Like you said,
Right.
You're usually getting him outside of the top 100. My own personal projections, I'm doing them by hand for the first time this year. I have Triston Casas hitting more homers than Rafael Devers at this point, 35 to 32. My projection for Casas is pretty massive, and I might have to regress it a little bit, but I think guys like yourself have kind of made me push him up.
No, you don't.
35 and 96 with a 277 average is what I have Casas down for. And
That's fair.
I'm trying to be more conservative. I was talking with some projections people. Ariel Cohen is somebody who's helped me with these a little bit. And he's telling me, you should be able to comfortably take either side of an over-under bet on your projections. And that's kind of how you should think about it. I'd be very comfortable taking the over on that 35 homers or the under. So I think that's a very, very, in my mind, realistic number for him to hit. And if you just look at the screen, if you are watching on YouTube, just take a look at the second half of Triston Casas. The ISO was 300. The OPS was well over 1,000, a 175 WRC plus. He was amazing. He was absolutely everything you could possibly hope for. Now, last year you were huge on Vinny P. This year it's more Casas. Which one do you have a better long-term outlook for?
I think Casas. Vinny P he's a super high floor guy, and there is some upside there, but I just don't think the upside can touch Casas. I think Vinny P is more like, yeah, he'll hit like 280, get a high OBP as well. Always has a super low K rate, but he's more like 25 home runs, maybe 30. Maybe he gets some low 30s years at peak, but I think, again, Casas is probably on average will probably be 6 to 8 home runs more per year. Average probably a little lower, but you add in a lot more counting stats, better home park, better lineup. I mean, Vinny P's really just got like Bobby Witt Jr., and that's that's it for the most part there in Kansas City. So yeah, as much as I love Vinny P, and everyone knows that, like, my love for Casas is much higher. He might be my favorite player in baseball right now. I mean, it's either him or Juan Soto are my two favorite players in baseball right now, and like, obviously me being a Red Sox guy, kind of fuels that a little bit, but. Yeah, and all the offseason videos Casas has been posting like on his Instagram and stuff like that have just been like getting me all hyped up even more. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to seeing him this year.
Yeah, I think that he can be a top 5 first baseman pretty easily. That price is really nice. It might go up a little bit, but I think generally speaking, you're going to get him outside of the top 100. If you want to wait on first baseman, it's hard to find somebody that you'll like more than Triston Casas in that lineup, considering the power, the potential batting, like everything. It's hard to find a fault there from a fantasy point of view, really. Now, projected about fourth is Trevor Story. Trevor Story has not had a nice Red Sox tenure so far, only 43 games this past season. He did pick it up at the end and started stealing a lot of bases, but overall, it has not looked great for him at Fenway. He's projected, if you're just looking at what Steamer's telling you, 146 games, maybe a little optimistic, but 21 and 22 with a 233 batting average. Does that sound about right to you? Is this something that you think is attainable at 2020 season from Story? Because if it is, then his price is probably worth it. He's not somebody that's terribly expensive at 178 this year. Are you buying back into Trevor Story?
I am to a degree, and I do think that if he plays that much, like if he gets, let's say look at 2021, he had 595 plate appearances. If he's in that ballpark and he went 24-20 that year, yeah, I think a 2020 season is definitely in the cards. Like he's still a good runner. Last year, 86 percentile sprint speed, and he still has pretty solid quality of contact metrics. Barrel rate right under 10%, hard hit rate right around 40%. So yeah, as a righty in Fenway, yeah, I think 2020 is in play. I just don't trust him to stay healthy. From what everything I've heard, like Story, like all the intangibles, like he's a great leader. He's working with the young guys, like all those things on the real life side have been, from what I've heard, just glowing, right? But and there's still some skills there, but at the same time, even if he's going 2020, I mean that 233 average that you just mentioned, that's probably fair. I don't even see him hitting 250 anymore. He hasn't done that since 2021, and maybe I'd love to see him be healthy to see if he could. But some skills since he left Colorado have gone down, and these aren't because of leaving the ballpark. Like these are like for instance, his zone contact has gone down. Like he was 82% zone contact in 2021. This past year, it went down to 75.2. The whiff rate's gone up. The strikeout rates have gone up. He's been over 30% K rate each of the last 2 years. Walk rate's gone down. Like these aren't things that have to do anything to do with Coors Field versus Fenway, Colorado versus Boston. That's actual just tangible skills that have declined, and he's 31 now. I think something there's some value, and the ADP, I think it's fine. I don't think I'll have a ton of shares. I think by that point, I already have my shortstop and maybe even my middle infielder. So I'm probably just going other directions, other positions in general, in that ADP range. Maybe I'll get a share or two just to see,
Yeah.
just to have just in case he does, put together 600 plus plate appearances. But I think that's fair. So if you're kind of weighted on shortstop, I won't trust him as your starting shortstop. That would be a very risky move. But if you want to get him as like your middle infielder, guy with some upside, yeah, I think that's a fine ADP for him.
Yeah, for me, I think he's a guy like if you need to make up some speed later on in your draft, you can take Trevor Story, and you're
Yeah,
probably looking at like a 20 stolen base floor if he's healthy. That's where I see him being the most productive in terms of that. Now, he might be able to give you 20 homers as well. I think I'd more rely on the speed at this point, just based on what we saw last year. I know it was a small sample size, 43 games, only 3 homers, a 114 ISO. He had a 48 WRC plus in those 43 games. It was shockingly bad. I don't think
yeah.
it can be that bad again, and I think he's probably worth taking a chance on considering the price. But yeah, if you're starting shortstop, you're playing with fire. You might get 40 games, you might get 140 games, but there's no certainty there. He is at this point one of the more risky, I don't want to put him necessarily in like the Buxton Eloy conversation, but he's not too far from it. He's not too far from it.
I love that you said that. I was literally just thinking, like, man, is he the Buxton of the infield? He might be. Like, it's not like outlandish to say that. I don't think. I mean,
Yeah.
Buxton. I think Buxton's 30 now as well, or at least 29. So they're not like terribly far apart in age either.
Yeah. I mean, if they're healthy for a season, either one of them, they're giving you, top 100 value very, very easily. But it's just a matter of if that's ever going to happen again. And now on the wrong side of 30, I don't know that we're necessarily going to see Trevor Story have a great season, but I think the price is there where you can buy into it and maybe you
Yeah.
get lucky. Masataka Yoshida is somebody that I was really, really big on last year. He was my rookie of the year pick in the American League. It was a pretty fair season from him 15 homers, 8 steals, 289 batting average. He's not terribly exciting in any particular category. He is kind of a late boost to your batting average at pick 179, literally just one pick after Trevor Story in ADP. I could see him maybe being a guy that you take to boost your batting average. but I don't think that we should have the expectation of massive growth from a power or a speed standpoint this year. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. I think what you're seeing from Yoshida, I think that's what he is, and I think he came as advertised.
Yeah.
I'm okay. As a Red Sox fan, and like I said, he hit 289, 15 home runs, 8 steals. That's pretty much what we were being sold on him being. I was a guy that this guy is high contact guy, high floor. He'll put the bat on the ball, a little bit of pop there, not a ton of pop, especially as a lefty in Fenway. So I'm kind of fine, and I think you can expect a pretty similar production from him. He did kind of falter a bit down the stretch. It's probably just because the long grueling first major league season. One of those things that obviously coming over from Asia to the United States is a big culture shock, and I think this doesn't get talked about enough that the adjustments these people have to make off the field as well to on the field. So I think you saw him fall off a good amount. He only hit 254, 278, 386 in the second half, as opposed to 316, 382, 492 in the first half. And maybe he's not that first half guy, but I think he's closer to the first half guy than the second half guy. Like, I think you can see him flirt with 300. Again, 15 to 18 home runs in that range, and give you a solid OBP as well. He just stopped walking in the second half for some reason. He had 7 walks in the second half, but I think he was pressing a bit too much. But hey, if that's what I think he's stable. Again, like you mentioned, not sexy whatsoever, but kind of like has like that Brendan Nimmo feel to him. Nimmo's never been super sexy, but
Right.
year in year out, he's just pretty solid and like, outfield 4 type of guy. So yeah, and as you alluded to earlier, outfield does dry up real quick. Like there's some fun guys sprinkled in, but once you get past like ADP, like that range around like 130, 140, where like Carter and Langford and then Churio now are all going. Once you get past that kind of cluster, it gets a little questionable. So if you want to just go with someone that's safe and will give you some production as long as he's healthy, he's a fine guy to take it as ADP.
Let's project like a year down the road. Is he a utility only player, you think, or do you think he gets enough games in the outfield to keep that eligibility?
I think for now is what I'm hearing is that they don't want one guy locked into that DH spot here in Boston. So I think he's got to keep it. I mean, y- 20 games for NFBC, Yahoo I think is only like 10, but I think for at least the next couple years, maybe you're 3-4 years out, might be a different story. But I think at least for the next for next year and the year after, I think you probably see him keep outfield eligibility.
Okay. Now, speaking of outfield, they brought in a new outfielder who is somebody, as a Canadian, I'm a little bit biased towards, but also just based on that 2021 season, I kind of fell in love with Tyler O'Neill. He gave you 34 homers, 15 steals, and a 286 batting average. I think he was one of the, maybe not a finalist for MVP, but I think he was like top 10 or top 12. Like he had a crazy breakout year. And then these last 2 years, it has not looked great for him. I think that part of the problem has been the way they've used him in St. Louis, and he didn't really get along with Marmol, who, I mean, that's kind of most people don't get along with Marmol from what it sounds like in St. Louis, but he was one of the people who was in the doghouse, did not get full time at bats. He was hurt. Now he gets a chance for a fresh start in Boston in a fairly hitter friendly park. I'm interested in Tyler O'Neill. I've taken him a couple times this year. You got interest in O'Neill? Do you think he's going to be able to get close to 2021 again? Or do you think we'll ever see those kind of numbers from him or something similar?
I mean, I think it's fair to say that those big years he had a handful of years ago might be his peak, right? I mean, could he get back to there? Sure, but I'm still in like on a bounce back because, like you mentioned, I think a fresh start was just needed with a guy like Tyler O'Neill. Guy that even through all the struggles, still put up some pretty solid metrics. Especially the guy still hits the ball really hard. You see him like he is a physical specimen, like someone like if I ever had to assemble a team of people to fight with me of MLB players, I'd probably pick Tyler O'Neill. That dude is just absolutely jacked. I think one of his parents was like a bodybuilder or something along those lines. I forget if it was his mother or his father,
It's
maybe
not
both.
Paul O'Neill. It's not Paul O'Neill, right? Paul O'Neill's not his dad,
I don't
or
think so.
I don't think I don't know. That kind of popped into my head. I might be just talking out of my ass there, but I'm gonna look it up while you talk.
Yeah, I don't think so, but I think one of his parents would, or maybe again both, were bodybuilders, or maybe an uncle or something. But yeah, so the skills are still there. Like there's actually some good metrics on under the hood. Like these last 2 years when he's kind of fallen off from that big 2021. Yeah, the EVs have gone down, 3 or so miles an hour. but the barrel rate's still 12.3% last year. EV 89.2, that's still above average. Hard hit rate's been right around 43%, still above average there. He's even trimmed the K rate, from about 5-6% from 2021, and increased the walk rate about 3 to 3.5%. So I think there's still a lot of good metrics there, some intriguing ones. He had the highest zone contact rate of his career last year, lowest whiff rate. So like he's made some improvements there. Still runs at a solid clip there. He's an above average runner, and I think getting his right-handed power into a place like Fenway, as long as he can elevate the ball, which he's usually had no problem doing, I think he obviously health is a thing with him too. He's battled some durability issues over the last couple of years. So if he can stay healthy, still 29 years old, I think he can have a nice bounce back year. I think it's like one of those like fresh start, bounce back type of guys for this year. And I think I love the ADP as well. I think the ADP is very fair, about 230, 240, 250 range. At that point, you probably already have at least 3 outfielders. So he's probably your outfield 4, maybe even your outfield 5. I think given where he's going, it's kind of a low risk and potential high reward guy. I'm absolutely fine with that. I'm definitely buying a nice little bounce back from him this year.
Yeah, I mean, he's only ever played the one full season, and it was an incredible season. I think that's what we're kind of dreaming on. If he's
Yeah.
able to get 120, 130 games, I think it's pretty much a guarantee 20 and 10, and then some, maybe 25 and 12. The projections are 21 and 12 over 126 games. If he's able to do that at the current price, then he'll pay off.
Yep.
I don't think we're going to see a 286 batting average again, but even if it's 240, 250 with those other numbers, the counting stats should be pretty all right considering who he's batting after in that lineup. You could see 80 to 90 RBI. I don't see any reason to avoid him at this price. If he doesn't work out, especially for those of you guys in 12-team leagues, if you're playing on Yahoo or whatever, this is like the last 3-4 rounds of your draft. He doesn't pan out, there'll be 10 other outfielders in the first month of the season who are worth adding. But if he does work out, then you're getting maybe a top 100 player in Tyler O'Neill. He is one of the sneaky players, and it won't be so sneaky because everybody is going to be talking about him. But for those of you guys, maybe the rest of your league doesn't consume a lot of content. Tyler O'Neill is a really, really good pick this season. If he's able to give you 80, 90% of what he did in St. Louis in that breakout year, then you're going to be very, very happy indeed. Now we get to the muddier portion of the lineup a little bit. Wilyer Abreu, I've heard some people talk about him in a positive light though recently as being somebody that you can take later on in a draft champions to bolster your bench. The projections are pretty good on a per game basis, 13 and 7 over 105 games with a 244 batting average. What we saw over 28 games last year was really, really strong from him. What's your interest level on Wilyer Abreu at this point?
I think if he's starting regularly, I think there's definitely going to be some interest here just because he's a guy, again, it's going, later on in drafts. You don't have to invest a lot of draft capital in a guy like Wilyer Abreu. And he looked pretty good, and he had a kid in the middle of that. So he was on maternity leave for like a week in the middle of his time with the Red Sox. But, hit 316, pair of home runs, trio of steals, 85 plate appearances. And the metrics are pretty solid too. Like, I don't think he's going to be a big speed guy. He's below average runner, though he's always shown a willingness to run, which is half the battle. But quality of contact is above average. He had a 49% hard hit rate, 9.5% barrel, 91.3 average exit velo. Walks at a solid clip. K rate's a bit higher, but not terrible. Nothing in the concerning level for sure. But it all comes down to like how much is he going to play? Like right now, if they don't bring in anybody else, I think he is playing close to regularly, which comes at the expense of a guy I like a lot too, in Ceddanne Rafaela, who has got a very fun fantasy friendly profile if he gets a shot too. So he's a guy take later on in your DCs. Just hopefully he gets a shot this year at some point. But if they don't bring anybody else in, I think Abreu is going to be a good value because where's his ADP? It can't be higher than what 400 or so.
It's 378 over the last month or so.
Yeah, that's kind of where I thought it might be, and that's fair. I mean, again, Red Sox have been linked to a few different outfielders. They're still talking with Adam Duvall. They were linked to Teoscar Hernandez before he went to the Dodgers, and what was the one recently? Oh, Jorge Soler. So, if they do bring someone else in, and that guy, maybe even if it's Soler, which forces Yoshida back out into the field a bit more. Yeah, I think this could have come at the expense of Abreu's at bats, but maybe he's traded. I don't know. There's still some possibilities, but as it stands now, if he's the guy out there in one of the corner outfield spots, I think there's a solid player there for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Roster Resource looks like they're projecting a strong side platoon at this point, but even that is probably 120 or so games if you're if you're not getting replaced, if you're just a healthy guy, regularly playing a strong side platoon, I think there's value in deeper leagues. But he's not somebody, if you're, like I mentioned earlier, a 12-team Yahoo league, that's not where I'd have him on the radar. He could get there with regular playing time, but I think in a deeper league that he is somebody that could kind of surprise you. He could give you double-digit homers and double-digit steals at the price he's currently going. I think in my current DC, I might have to put him in my queue because that's actually not a bad price for what could be a pretty decent profile there. Vaughn Grissom. Vaughn Grissom is very interesting to me. I've drafted him a few times. He's starting the year with just shortstop eligibility, but he will gain second base. Trevor Story is going to be the shortstop there, and we should see Grissom get second base eligibility. Last year was very frustrating. I was pretty in on him, and then Atlanta didn't use him at all. When they did, it didn't look that great. No homers and no steals in 23 games. Still a good batting average, but we didn't get to see him actually break out after that 2022 semi breakout that led us to draft him fairly high up last season. Now he has a fresh start. Looks like he has an everyday role, which he was not going to get in Atlanta. So I'm cautiously interested here in Vaughn Grissom at pick 321. I don't see really much downside there.
Yeah, at that point, especially when you factor in, like you mentioned, that he's going to get dual eligibility, sometime mid to late April. You got to love that because there's a pretty solid profile here. Like it's not a sexy one, but this is a guy that's always had really good contact skills. In the minor leagues, he was a 320 hitter over 329 games. Almost 1,500 plate appearances, at a 407 OBP in the minor leagues. A high walk rate over 10%, low K rate under 20%. A lot of good there. And yeah, they're not a massive power speed blend, but I think there's enough pop in the profile that with a full season at Fenway as a righty hitter, he could run in the 12 to 15 home runs. I think that's definitely in play, and he's a solid runner as well, not a burner, but decent runner. 20 steals ish, give or take. So like a 280, 15, 20 year. Yeah, maybe that might be on the higher end of potential outcomes. That's definitely in play here. Like, he never really, like you said, never really got a shot. So it was kind of surprising. Yeah, he didn't perform well in spring training, and then Arcia took that spot from him. I get it. Arcia definitely deserved it, and he's been low key a pretty solid player for the Braves. But I think another fresh start. Boston, like they're gonna give him that second base job. They like him. Everything I've heard out of Red Sox camp, they traded Chris Sale for him, so they think very highly of him. So he'll be the guy,
Yeah.
and they have him under team control for the next like 6-7 years. So yeah, I think he's gonna be our second baseman of the future, and he'll pair with Mayer someday. To be that middle infield duo, and for fantasy this year, given the post 300 ADP, I mean, again, not sexy, but there's little risk in this profile at that point in the draft.
Yeah, there's not much risk at all as far as I see it. I think 123 games played that Steamer's projecting is on the low end as well. Like you
Yeah.
said, he should be the everyday guy. So you take those, 9 homers and 8 steals they're projecting. It's probably closer. Like my current projection is 10 and 14. And again, that's done by hand. I've taken a lot of time with it, but it's definitely not as accurate as what you're seeing from Steamer, from the bat, and those types. But I think that you're going to see more stolen bases, essentially. You're going to see 15 to 20 steals. You'll see double digit homers. That batting average is very safe. And to add on to your batting average at that point in the draft, and it's not a zero, like if you're adding Luis Ariz, it could be 3 homers, it could be 4 steals. But if you're getting a guy like Grissom, he's not going to be necessarily the same average asset as Ariz, but you're getting a more well balanced profile at a much later price. If you are looking to bolster just the batting average, I don't know that you could do much better than Grissom at this point. The dual eligibility, there's just a lot to really like here. And I think that he's somebody that I've already taken a couple times. There was one team where he is my starting shortstop, which is maybe a little bit of a risk, but honestly, I think that it's not even that much of a risk in an FBC 15 team style league. I'll take a chance on Vaughn Grissom there. If it doesn't work out, then it doesn't work out. But I think the upside is there for it too, and he'll have the opportunity to make it work. How risky? Do you think that's too risky that he's a starting shortstop on one of my teams, 15 teamer?
I mean, maybe a bit. Yeah, I think there definitely is some risk there, but it's not like you're putting all your eggs into a guy that has like a ton of risk in general, like a guy that has like a lot of injury history
Yeah.
or something like that. Like I'm trying to think of a good player to think of. Like let's just say for the sake of this, like Byron Buxton was a shortstop. Like if
Yeah.
you were putting all your eggs in Byron Buxton as your starting shortstop,
Yeah.
that would be incredibly risky. But I mean, yeah, you probably in an ideal world one of the better starting guy than Grissom. But I mean, again, he's more of a high floor guy, so like, I
Yeah.
don't think you're gonna be too upset about the end of the year.
Let's hope not. One team I have him as a starter. One team I have him as a. I think he's on the reserve on my other team, but I'm hoping for a big year. I think that he's somebody that could have a really nice year. And now rounding out the lineup, the projected lineup is Connor Wong behind the dish. And again, common theme. I didn't even realize this until we started, but I've drafted Connor Wong a couple times this year. I think you're getting some speed from your catcher, which is huge. I think you should have a fairly regular role. You're not getting a hell of a lot of batting average, but generally speaking, you're not from any catcher. And 235 is actually on the higher end for catchers, in my opinion. I think it's mostly just the speed you're getting from the backstop position that leads me to want to have him as a C2 this year. He's not like it's a 12 team, one catcher league. I don't know that he's there, but in your two catcher formats, I think that he should be drafted in pretty much all of them.
Yeah, no, he's definitely a C2 guy this year for sure, and probably the last year he will be, at least in a Red Sox uniform, because he's basically just keeping the seat warm for Kyle Teal and 2025 and beyond. But it's just funny to think like, all right, this is the one guy that's left in the Mookie Betts trade. Obviously we just dealt Verdugo a month and a half ago. Jeter Downs flailed out a couple years ago and then went to the Nats, and then I don't even know where Jeter Downs, what team he's with. This is he still with the Nats? I don't remember.
Marlins? Was it the
Marlin?
Marlins?
Oh, yeah, he did go to Marlins. I don't even know where he
I
is,
actually
but
have no idea.
he obviously fizzled out and it didn't reach his potential. But it's funny, like the one guy left from that deal is Connor Wong, which probably would have been your last pick to be the last man standing from that deal. But yeah, I guess C2, he's totally fine. You mentioned gives you a handful of steals. There's not a ton of upside here. Metrics don't look great, but he's gonna play. Like we don't have he is the starting catcher at least for this year until Teal is ready next year, probably. And again, if he can give just what he did last year, which I think is in play, 235, if approach 10 home runs, give you 5 to 10 steals as well. You'll take that all day. Like you mentioned, you don't really get speed from catching in general. That's sort of like Real Muto, maybe like one or two others give you a handful. So if you're getting 7, 8 steals from your C2, you'll take that every day.
The games play projection is really low, 75. Do you think Reese McGuire is going to eat into that to that extent?
I don't think so. Like Reese is not good. Like
Yeah. Oh,
he
I
is
know.
he is like yeah, being a
He was a
Toronto
Blue
guy.
Jay. He was a Blue Jay. I remember. Trust me.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like back in that log jam of catchers you had a couple years ago,
Oh my
but
god.
you had like 5 catchers at one point, I swear.
Yeah.
But yeah, I highly doubt that is very like he played 126 last year. I don't see any reason why it's not at least in that 115 plus range again. Like I don't see McGuire getting more than 40 to 50 starts. I mean, I'm not sure what they're thinking there, but maybe they think Teal comes up later in the year, which I guess is possible in late down the stretch. But I don't think they want to rush him either. But yeah, I think he's more like 115, 125 range.
Yeah, McGuire's projected for 60 games on Steamer. That seems a
No,
little high. He started
doubt
62
that.
games behind the dish last year, which is probably where they're coming from. But I don't think
So
we're going to get to that same number this
so where
year.
do we get? So if they have him at 60, and they have
Wong
Wong
at
at like what
70.
75, where's the other like 25 to 30 coming from? Maybe they do have Teal coming up later in the year. I'm not sure.
It could be that could be what it is, and I can actually just check here. Yeah, that is honestly probably what the case is, that they've allocated some playing time to Teal. Let's see, Boston Steamer. Um, Not really.
There's
So
Wong.
75 for Wong. I don't know where they're getting it from, to be honest with you.
I don't know. Yeah, they're missing about 27 games, and it's not that doesn't look like it's going to Teal. I don't
60
know.
and 75. I don't know where they're getting that from, but they still have Alberto Mondesi in here, and Mondesi is not part of the roster at this point. So maybe they're in need of a bit of an upgrade.
Mondesi.
I'm not sure when the last time was that these got updated. So potentially they're in need of doing something
Yeah.
there. But yeah, Reese McGuire, I don't think will be too much of a factor. It should be Connor Wong. I think he's a decent catcher number 2. Anybody on the bench interest you? Bobby Dahlbeck's still hanging around. Valdez, Ref Snyder, anybody there you think could potentially move into a starting role throughout the year?
I don't think so. If I had to pick one, probably Valdez. Just in case Grissom doesn't work out for whatever reason. Valdez. They like Valdez. He had some decent time at second base last year, so maybe him. But no, the really only other hitter that interests me, like I mentioned earlier, is Cesar Rafaela. If he gets some time in the outfield, and he could play in the infield too. He's played some short and second in his minor league career as well. Good athlete, quick guy. So I think he could play there if needed. But Yeah, at the bench, I mean, again, maybe Valdez, maybe grab him and super late in the DC. Dahlbeck's got pop. Like Dahlbeck's a good batting practice guy. But
Mhm.
he's shown, like, you just look at the slash rate on your screen. Like, it was only 53 play appearances, but the dude just can't hit in general. And again, he's just a guy you watch take batting practice and go ooh and ah, and that's it. Yeah, McGuire, nothing special. Ref Center's just a dude. I mean, he's just there to have another outfielder on the roster. So yeah,
Yeah.
really no interest in any of those bench guys.
Yeah, no need to take a look there for fantasy. Let's move to the starting pitching rotation, and you have a new ace in town. Ace, I'll use in air quotes, but potentially could be somebody that does come back to form. Lucas Giolito did have a couple of damn good years in Chicago. We saw ERAs of 3.41, 3.48, 3.53. The last couple of years have not been kind to him. Three teams he pitched for last season. I do want to point out as well that I did hear this, that he went through a divorce this past season. So that's
Mhm.
also something that, it impacts different players differently. You never know. But just another factor. Maybe he wasn't fully right mentally last year. Now we'll get to the point of what about 2022, but I want to give him a bit of a pass, and I do think that he can be better than what we have seen these last couple of seasons. But it's hard to argue that there hasn't been a decline as well.
Yeah, no, obviously, no, don't give him a pass for last year, but
Yeah.
there's some stuff going on, and obviously that definitely factor out the human side of this game. And when we signed him, I think there was a mixed bag of reactions from Red Sox fans, but I was okay with it. But at the time, I was like, all right, this if he's like our 3 or something like that, and then we go out, and this is before obviously we still had Sale at this point in time, and I was like, all right, if we go out and get like I think Yamamoto was still available. If like we go out and get one of these guys like Yamamoto, Snell, whatever, or even like a Jordan Montgomery, I'm like that, I'll be fine with that. Like if this is just a precursor to another move, I'm good with it. But I think I made a tweet shortly after that. I was like, man, I really hope that this isn't the biggest pitching acquisition we have, and that he's our ace. And now that's becoming more and more of a reality. But in general, I think he's gonna be fine. Like I don't think he's gonna get back to those 2019 to 2021 levels, but I think he's better than 2022, 2023. Maybe you're looking at somewhere right in the middle. Guy that's like in the vicinity of like a 4 ERA. Even through the struggles, he's still giving you innings. He was 184 and a third last year, and that's like the new 200 these days. So he's still giving you, and he still strikes out. He had 200. He's had over 200 strikeouts in 2 of the last 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, the ERAs were approaching 5 each of the last 2 years. But if you're looking at a guy that can give you 180 innings, maybe give you a 4 ERA and, another 200 Ks or so, he's been right around 25, 26% K rate, which is above average. I think he's going to be like a top, I don't know, 50 to 60 guy, a guy that's maybe your SP4 or something like that, SP5. I think he's fine there, but I think people are going to be, especially Boston fans, not going to be happy if he's a guy that's going trotting out there on opening day, which at this point I don't think they give it to Bayo, probably not Pavetta, so it probably is Giolito. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think a nice little bounce back, especially if he can curb the home run issue that was really plaguing him. Like he gave up, was it 41 home runs last year, 19 on the four seam, 13 on the changeup, and 9 on the slider. If he can kind of start locating that better again, like he used to, I think you can see a decent little bounce back with him in 2024.
Yeah, look at that homer per 9 that I've highlighted there, 2.0.
Yeah,
That
not
is
good.
not something that is going to sustain to that extent. It's just not. Nobody has a number that bad. I think we could probably see a low 4s ERA. They're projecting 4.58, which does seem a little high. I think you can see low 4s. He's somebody that is an innings eater, 170 plus innings. You're getting 200 strikeouts out of him, and you're getting him past pick 200. And I think that's kind of the main factor here is he's not expensive at all. 221. And again, I'll make the point, if you're playing in a shallower league, you can kind of take a chance at that range. And that's kind of streamer territory for your 12 teamers, 10 teamers. If it doesn't work out, there's going to be somebody that's a viable streamer in that range that probably will work out for you. And even if they don't, you can use that roster spot to kind of churn and burn. It's not to the point where it's like, oh, he's the top 100 player, I have to keep him on my team the whole year. We went through that with Giolito the last 2 years. At this point, he's
Right.
kind of exhausted our patience. And if it doesn't work out, if we see in April that he's shit still, that's probably too strong of a word, but if we see he's performing not up to the standards we're hoping, then you can cut him, and it's not going to really cost your team too much. But I think at the price, you can take a chance if you just keep your expectations in check. Nick Pavetta is somebody that I am very interested in just because of what we saw in the second half. And even if you just look at the whole season, It was actually really strong. The 4.04 ERA is not amazing, but it was the highest of all the ERA and ERA estimators. 398 on the xERA, 355 on the xFIP. His Sierra was 336, which was an X. That's an amazing number. 31% strikeout rate. Are we going to get hurt again with Pivetta this year? Are we ready to do it? Because I think I'm ready to get hurt by Nick Pivetta again.
I mean, I think I might too. I mean, he was one of the best pitchers, not just on the staff, in all of baseball
Yeah.
in the second half of last year. And, pretty diverse arsenal, four seam, curveball, cutter, sweeper, and the occasional slider, all of which, like, there's not any like problem pitch there. I mean, you look at overall, every pitch fared pretty well last year. None had the super high whiff rates, like 50% whiff rates, but you look at the curveball, slider, cutter, and sweeper, all were between a 31 and 44% whiff rate. And in the four seam, about 94 and a half, 95 miles an hour, only a 214 batting average against on that. Curveball 215, slider 189. Like, I've been trying to kind of disprove what he did last year. And yeah, I don't think he's going to repeat the second half. I think that'd be foolish to expect that. But can he be a serviceable kind of like middle of the road fantasy arm? Sure. You look at he had 183 Ks and just 142 and 2/3 innings. I mean, he's probably locked into this rotation. So if you're getting, maybe upper 3, low 4 ERA, maybe he's 4.04 last year, maybe that's the expectation, give or take, 0.2 either way. And if you're getting, an above average K rate, and if he can get back up closer to the 180 innings where he was the previous year, I mean, there's some sneaky value there. And I don't think the draft price has really kind of reflected what he's capable of. And what's the, I mean, it's okay. It is 176 since I thought it was outside top 200. I mean, that is fine. I don't love that, but I don't think there's like a huge ROI possibility there. But could he return like top 150 ish value? Absolutely. I think if you're getting what I just said, 4 ERA, and 170 innings, 190 Ks, something along those lines. I think that's, definitely a top 150 guy. And if you get him as your, at that point, he's the 69th pitcher off the board. You got to figure, and this is NFBC, so they factor in relief pitchers here. So that's probably like SP 50-ish range. So he's going to be your SP3 or, more 4 or 5, depending on how deep your league is. I think you're fine with that.
I have no problem with it at all. I think NFBC players, like, it's going to go up. The price is going to get more expensive. That's just kind of how it works with pitching. 175 right now, 176 in that range. I'll take a chance on him a couple times. But if you are, like, this is how I look at it. If you're a volume player and you play in 100 leagues, I'll take a chance on that. And most people don't play in 100 leagues, but that's kind of just the number I'll use. If you're doing that, you can take him 10, 12, 15 times, whatever. If you're like a single shot type of player, he is a really risky guy to invest in. Assuming, like, let's say the price gets to 150 and you're talking, it's like round 10, your third SP. If that's the only league you're going to play in, do you want Nick Pivetta as your third starting pitcher? Probably not. But I think if you're somebody who does play in, like we do, and like a lot of people we know, 10, 20 leagues, you can take Pivetta a few times and have a chance of that upside. But don't forget about everything else we've seen from Nick Pivetta over the past 5-6 years. It can be very good, but it can also look really ugly. And will he be a 30% K rate guy? There's like 5 pitchers in baseball who were 30% K rate guy last year. So probably not, but I think that he can still give you probably a really good season. And it's not somebody I'm going to feel great about drafting, but it's somebody that if you look at the numbers, it's kind of hard, like Eric said, to really doubt him and to find something that's that concerning. He was amazing in the second half, and I think that I will take a chance on a couple of teams this year, while also understanding that it may not work out for me because of how Nick Pivetta has always been. But let's talk Brian Bayo. Brian Bayo, he's working with Pedro Martinez now. I saw you posted that the other night. That's kind of exciting. Now, I don't want people to read too much into that. He's not going to now be prime Pedro, but Brian Bayo is already coming from a place of being pretty damn good. And he's somebody who has, over the course of his career, which is still only 39 starts, but he's outperformed the 4.37 ERA with a 3.96 xFIP. He's got a 4.14 Sierra. He's not the flashiest guy. He's not going to give you a ton of strikeouts, but I think he's a really stable option in the back end of your rotation, and he's not expensive like a lot of these Red Sox. $229 is the price.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on Bayo? Are you interested this year? Can he take another step forward?
I think he can. I saw Bayo a ton in the minor leagues when he came to Double A here. I think I probably saw 5 or 6 of his starts during his time here, and I think there definitely is that upside for more. I mean, I think he's been fine, and I've been okay with his performance so far. But like you kind of just mentioned, the K rate hasn't quite been as high as we thought. It was 20.5% his rookie year, which is below average. I think MLB average is right around 22%. And then it dropped down to 19.8% this past year. Velo on the sinker dropped about a mile an hour. But the key here is the slider. I think he's got one of the better changeups in baseball. Had a 196 batting average against, 38.7% whiff rate on the changeup. It's always been a very good changeup. It's a plus changeup, but the slider hasn't performed nearly as well as I think most people were anticipating it would, and not as good as it was in the minor leagues. Look at last year on the slider, 304 batting average against, and only at 25.5% whiff rate. I mean, it's more of a he's kind of not old school because I can't think a guy in his 30 years old school, but the new crave is the sweeper, right? Getting all that horizontal movement. He's got more of a gyro slider with elite vertical movement. So it's kind of different than the trend lately over the last 12, 18 months. But it's got good movement, and he commanded it fairly well this past year. Look, it's mostly down in the zone, so maybe tries to dip it more out of the zone, get more swing and miss on that. So I think if you see that tick up, that's the key. If you see that slider whiff rate tick up a bit, maybe 33, 34%, get up closer to that changeup, which I think it could. Maybe he's 24, 25% K rate guy, which is above average. I don't think he'll ever be elite in that regard, but I think he definitely can see at least a few percentage points tick up and drop the ERA again. Maybe he's down like the 3.7 range, and bam, you got like a Jose Barrios type of guy. Barrios is kind of living in that 3.6 ERA range with a 24% K rate. Maybe
Yeah.
Bayo's in that range. So I think given the upside for more this year, I think that ADP around 230 or so, I think that's fair.
That's well put. I think the Jose Barrios comp is really good. Bayo is somebody who struck out a lot of batters in the minor leagues. So you think
Yep.
that, he's not going to be a 20% guy at the big leagues forever. He'll probably get up to, and the projections think he'll only be at 20.1% next year. But just look back, even at his most recent stretch in AAA, it was a 34% K rate, and that was over 50, 58 innings. It's a good enough sample size of strikeouts where I'm not going to say it's fake. And he did it at a bunch of different levels. Now, he hasn't done it at the big leagues for 2 years, but I think you just need incremental increases at that point, right? If it's from 20 to 22%, that gets you into the range of acceptability. Being at 20% is a little bit too low. And I know it's only a few strikeouts difference, but that really does make a difference for your fantasy teams, whether or not a guy is at, what was it last year? 132 Ks in 157 innings versus 145, 150. And I think he's probably going to be closer to that strikeout per inning. I think he's going to get a lot of volume, 160, 170 innings, close to a 4 ERA. And I think that he is another really good investment. I think that's kind of a common theme with the Red Sox. They're pretty good investments this year. Most of their costs are kind of down from years past. The Stories, the Giolitos, the O'Neills of the world. There's a lot of value, I think,
Yeah.
in drafting Red Sox. And I don't think there's any different with Brian Bayo. Lot of really interesting pieces here as you go down. Tanner Houck is projected as the number 4 starter. I'm not sure how it's all going to shake out, but as of right now, he is projected as the number 4 starter. I like him. I don't love him, and I don't know that there's a hell of a lot of juice here for fantasy. But talk me into Tanner Houck if he's somebody that interests you.
I mean, as it stands now, I'm probably not going to be drafting a lot of Tanner Houck. There's definitely some talent in the arm. I think that's obvious. And I think low key, he could be, if we trade Kenley Jansen, which there's been, rumblings of that,
Mhm.
I think he could be a sneaky source of saves this year. It would surprise me if end of the year, like, oh, hey, Houck got 12 saves or something like that. Obviously, if Jansen leaves. But as a starter, I mean, I just don't think he's cut out to be a starter. Like, obviously, the sinker, slider, and the splitter as well. I think he's more suited for the bullpen long term. And I think even if it's not a big guy like a lot of us Red Sox fans want, like I don't think we're gonna go out and trade for Burns or sign Snell or anything like that, or even Jomo. But we've been rumored to be in on some cost controllable arms, more like maybe we bring back James Paxton or something like that. I don't know, more like SP4 types. So if they do that, I do think Houck ends up in the bullpen. And if we don't trade Jansen as well, that will kind of kill his value. So he'll be in some middle relief, long relief role, pitching in the 5th, 6th inning, something like that. Maybe he gets into a setup role, but Probably not going to be a guy that's going to provide a lot of value this year. Again, if Jansen gets moved, and then maybe see how they use the back end of the bullpen early in the season, it would probably be Chris Martin. But I think Houck could provide some sneaky value there. So if he's going late enough in your drafts and your DCs, sure. But I just don't have a lot of interest here. Like, I've seen enough of Tanner Houck to know that what he is better suited in the bullpen.
Yeah, 412 is the ADP, and even though it's cheap, I just don't really have that much interest. That's still fairly early. 412, that's like round 27 or 26, something like that. It's just a little bit too early to be taking a chance on a guy. Like you said, the floor is zero value. The floor is he's pitching twice a week for 5 or 6 innings as a 2-inning guy in the pen. Like, that's the floor, and there's not a hell of a lot of upside there either. Not a massive strikeout guy. I don't see him being a massive ratio guy either. What was his whip last season? It was 137. There's just not a lot there, I don't think, with Houck. He's somebody we don't need to spend too much time on. Not somebody that's terribly interesting for fantasy. Cutter Crawford. I think Cutter Crawford could be interesting as a number 5 starter. I also think potentially that Garrett Whitlock might get some starts out of the 5th spot, but I could be wrong there. That might just be I was trying to project him the other night, and he was giving me a bunch of grief because I wasn't really sure what the role is. Is Cutter Crawford going to be the number 5 starter, you think?
I think so. I think out of the 3 we just mentioned, Houck, Crawford, and Garrett Whitlock, I would bet a pretty solid amount of money that Crawford is one that makes the most starts for this team this year.
Okay.
And Crawford, and he's low key, he's a solid arm.
Yeah.
Last year, he had a 4.04 ERA, but xERA was 3.25. You look at on Savant, a lot of red. He misses bats. So he was the I just lost it here. Yeah, the chase rate was 32%, whiff rate 27%. Better than league average. Contact rates allowed as well. Doesn't give up a ton of hard contact either. 88% or 88 mile an hour exit velocity, 35% hard hit rate. And last year he had a 19 or a near 19% K minus walk rates, and he made 23 starts last year, 129 in the 3rd innings. I think you could see something pretty similar. Is he going to be a 30 plus start guy? Maybe not, but if he can get you 140 innings, and give you 150 Ks and a ERA around 4. I mean, maybe there's not that big of a gap between him and like a Bayo. Obviously, Bayo will probably give you 30 or so more innings, but especially when you bake in the draft costs, like where is Cutter is going? Oh, that's even higher than I thought it was. He's going about 4 or 5 rounds back, which I think is fair for him. I mean, I like him a lot more than a lot of the other guys in this range. Like, I like him more than Stroman, Waka. Yeah, I'm pretty even putting him in Waka. I like him more than Griffin Canning, Mackenzie Gore. I like Crawford better than him. Lance Lynn. Oh, geez, I don't want anything to do with Lance Lynn at this point. Tyon, Luis Severino, super risky. So I think Crawford has shown that he can be an effective major league starter, and maybe he's a guy that still pitches a little bit out of the bullpen as well. Like last year, he made pretty much a 2/3 to 1/3 split between starts and relief appearances, which is probably what happens again this year. But yeah, I think he gets you 140 innings, and they could be a pretty solid one. So that's I don't love the ADP, but I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I'll take a chance a couple times. He's not like a must draft type of player, but if things work out for him, you're looking at a strong strikeout rate, good walk rate as well. Supporting numbers say that he's about a 4 ERA guy. Projections have him at 4.66. That feels like they're selling him short a little bit.
Yeah.
I think somewhere in the low 4s is probably what you're probably should be expecting here for Cutter Crawford. Whitlock, let's talk about Garrett Whitlock a little bit, though. Do you think that he gets any starts this year? I'm trying to do my own projections, like I mentioned, and he is somebody that I don't know how many starts I should be putting him down for, if any, because last year he made 10, the year before he made 9. They're projecting 0 on Steamer, but I think he's probably suited for a starting role. But what do you think?
I don't know. I don't think it's gonna be 0, but if this is the pitching staff that we have right now as we enter the season, if I throw a number out there, I'd say like 6 or 7. So
Okay.
I still don't think it's gonna be a lot. I think they do think of him more as a reliever, and a guy that could be a pretty solid one as well. Like we saw him really thrive in a relief role back in 2021, and then they tried to go in the Daniel Bard route from a decade before that and make him into a starter. Didn't work with Bard. Didn't work with Whitlock really. Though Whitlock he had some moments where he was fine, but still never exceeded 80 innings in a season. His career high is 78 and a third back in 2022. So I think he's better suited in a bullpen, and maybe he's a guy. I don't think he's ever going to be a closer even. So he's a guy that if you play in a league with like saves and holds or some variation of that, he could be guy get you a lot of holds this year. Again, I do think they bring in another reliever, and that even makes his start projection even lower. So a guy for fantasy, I think he falls into that better in real life than fantasy category right now, just because I don't think he's going to be in a very fantasy friendly role this year.
Okay, that makes sense. He's somebody that I think on a good few teams they might give him a chance to start. We've seen some strong supporting numbers from him. Low walk rate is always good, but
Yeah.
he's going to be somebody who's tough to actually hit the draft button on. Now, we mentioned him earlier. We're going to move to the pen here before we wrap things up. Kenley Jansen is the guy as of right now. There's no reason to think that if they don't trade him, that he'll not be the closer. He will be the closer, assuming he is in Boston. What are you putting the odds at right now, Eric, that he does get traded before the season starts?
I'll say like 40%. I think it's close to 50-50. If I had to bet money, I would lean towards him still being here, but and if he is, and I'm sure wherever he goes, he probably goes into a place where he can close as well. But Jansen, he's fine. Like obviously, peak years are behind him. He's 35 years old, or maybe is he 36? Yeah, he's actually 36 now. But peak years are behind him. The years of the Dodgers are in the rear view. But he's still been he just screams RP2 to me. Like you go out and get whether it's like a Josh Hader, Camilo Doval, whoever it is, as your RP1, and then you get a very sturdy guy like Kenley Jansen as your RP2, guy that just gets you saves after saves after saves. Like let's see, last year he had 29 and then 41, 38, 11 in the shortened 2020 year, which equates to like 30-ish, 33, 38, 41, 47. Like the dude just gets saves, 420 his career. Yeah, the ERAs are more like in the mid threes now. Doesn't have quite the same K rate as he once did. But again, if you just want a stable RP2, I think like I'll get a lot of Kenley Jansen shares this year.
Yeah, that was going to be my follow-up question. So if he gets traded, I'm just trying to think of like different destinations where he would still be the closer. Would it be maybe like a Detroit, an Oakland, a Washington? I'm trying to think of like a team that doesn't have an amazing closer where he would save. I can't think of any other ones off the top of my head. Maybe Philadelphia doesn't need another arm there. There are a couple teams that have uncertain situations, and I think he's the type of guy like kind of like a Craig Kimbrell, where wherever he is, he's going to be the closer. He's going to be best suited in the ninth inning. He's not somebody that has a lot of eighth, seventh inning experience.
Yeah.
Now the skills have been declining a bit, but like you said, he's more of that kind of SP or RP2 type, where he's not going to be your main source of saves, but he is somebody that you could probably bank on like 30, 29 last year, 41, 38. Like you mentioned, it's pretty consistently 30 plus saves from him. I feel pretty okay with it. I think I've drafted him one time this year as my second guy, and you'd probably want to back him up with somebody as a third option. I would say, like, let's say you go with a Hader and then a Jansen. I wouldn't just leave it at that. I would kind of want to have a third option, whether it's maybe a Pete Fairbanks, Alvarado, or somebody as a potential third option in case Jansen does get traded. If he gets hurt, because he is 36 years old, you never know how much is left in the tank at this point. So I would kind of be insuring it with a third guy, but I do like Jansen at cost this year. He's not as nearly as expensive as he used to be. Now, Chris Martin, I think, and you mentioned as well, is probably the guy, like, let's say he does get hurt or whatever, that would fill in this role, assuming that there's no Hader signing or something.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that Martin would be the guy, and he's probably a guy that gets 5-6 saves as is the guy that if Jansen's worked back to back nights, you bring in Martin just so you don't overdo Jansen, and he's a guy. It's funny. You look at the K rate the last 4 years, it fluctuated so much: 30%, 18%,
Yeah.
33%, 23%, which is kind of weird, but very high floor reliever. A guy that's super low walk rate, 3.2% for his career. Yeah, obviously, I don't think he's going to be a 1.05 ERA guy again, but
Yeah.
even if you look back at what he did in 2022, a guy that was right around a 3 ERA, and maybe if you take the middle of the last 2 years of K rates and put him at like 27, 28%, which I think is definitely possible. Yeah, I think that's he's a guy that's going to play up a ton, and if you again play in those leagues that value holds in some way, he's going to play up initially right off the bat and be a guy that gets you a ton of holds, being the eighth inning guy, and I think Boston might have the oldest 8-9 combination in baseball because
Yeah.
Martin's like 37, almost 38. but still a very effective arm. Actually had some of his best metrics he's ever had last year. He only allowed a 2.1% barrel rate last year, 84.5 mile an hour average EV. So a lot of good in the profile still, and I think guy that's done a lot of good for a long time, last several years. So yeah, if Jansen's dealt or gets hurt, I think Martin kind of enters that RP2 or at least RP3 range if he gets that chance.
Yeah. Anybody else we've missed here in terms of the whole roster, or have we covered it pretty full? I think we've got most of it, but in terms of maybe any prospects we would have missed or anything.
I don't think so. Again, this Rafaela, I'll throw his name out there again, even though I already mentioned him earlier. I think he definitely gets, he got a little bit of a shot last year, and he's a guy, it's going to depend on who they bring in for outfielders if they do. But, a lot of the other top prospects are, I think, more 2025 guys, Mayer, Teal, Anthony, obviously the big three here. I think actually they're all starting out in my neck of the woods up here in Double A Portland, so I'll get to see them a lot, which will be fun. But yeah, and maybe they get up late in the year, but it won't be more than a cup of coffee if anything. So yeah, I think that's I think we pretty much hit everybody that's relevant this year.
I think we did, and honestly, I mentioned it in the middle, but there's a lot of great value in this
Yeah,
lineup from fantasy purposes. A lot of these guys that are kind of the older, forgotten about dudes, Trevor Story, Tyler O'Neill, and not even older necessarily, but forgotten about in Vaughn Grissom. Even Rafael Devers doesn't have the same kind of cachet that he used to. You're getting him a little bit later. There's a lot to like, really top to bottom here. More so in the lineup, I think, than the pitching rotation as a whole. There's more value in the lineup, but even a guy like Giolito, a guy like Bayo, they're not expensive if you want to get into the Boston Red Sox business this year. And there's a couple of guys I think that really are worth it. But Eric, I really appreciate you coming on, man. It's always fun to talk with you.
yeah. Thanks for having me on, Joe. I always enjoy talking with you as well, and love talking about the Red Sox, of course. And yeah, I'll quickly just agree with what you just said about the values. Yeah, there's not a value on this team in ADP that I'm like I'm out. Like I don't say that about any
Yeah.
player. A lot of good values, like you mentioned. So yeah, this is for fantasy purposes. It's kind of a sneaky fun team.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is. Real life, the AL East is tough. We're
It
both
is.
fans of AL East teams that are kind of disappointing, and we saw the rest of the division kind of get a little bit stronger. But we'll get through it together. We'll be okay. I don't think either of our teams are going to do much this year, but in any event, we should have some fun for fantasy purposes. Eric, you can find on Twitter at EricCross04, host of the Tool Shed podcast. Go ahead and rhyme off everything once again, Eric, because I know I'm going to miss it. You do so much stuff.
Yeah, it's toolshedfantasy.com. That's where all my rankings are and pretty much almost daily content there. And then FTN, FTNfantasy.com, and then Rotoball are doing, one or two articles a week for both of those sites. Both great sites. Got a lot of, great content writers there, a lot of tools and, premium packages. So definitely go check out both of those sites. And then the Toolshed podcast with Chris Clegg, and we're actually going up to 3 episodes a week for the remainder of the preseason. And then we'll be back down to 2 episodes a week when the season starts. But a lot of fun stuff to talk about there. So yeah, a lot of fun. This time of year is always a blast. Obviously, with draft season really kicking up now in January, and it's a fun time of year. I love it.
Oh, it's busy with podcasts and articles and rankings and projections and draft guides and you name it. We're doing it right now, but obviously keep up with Eric's work. He does amazing stuff. FTN is great. Rotoballer, everything that Eric is involved in, we got great work you can find over there. We'll talk with Eric again throughout the season at some point. If not, we'll talk on trade deadline day when we'll get you back, because you've been somebody that's been there every year so far that we've done it. So we'll make sure to keep the streak alive, of course. Go over to Twitter. You can check us out, AirCross04, at Joe Orico99. You can check out my work. And go ahead and check out sportsethos.com. We got content across all 4 major sports. We have team coverage. We have gambling, DFS. You name it, we got it. So make sure you're checking us out over there. We'll be back again tomorrow. But until then, everybody, take care. Have a great night. We'll see you then.